Oh, no.
Yes.
I thought it was just the computer crashing and yeah. So Ernesto works on sociology of science and justice. He's done and is doing loads. And I really enjoy working with you, Ernesto, because you're always full of surprises and you make everything more energetic and more, I don't know, you've just got so much enthusiasm. So I'm really looking forward to your session today, and yeah, looking forward to the discussion that we're all going to have. If you're online, don't hesitate to post questions in the chat. Alina's here, she'll be looking out for you, and we can also have you unmute as well. So yeah, Ernesto, take it away.
Thanks a lot. So yes, it's gonna be a weird talk. It's gonna be about dreams, volcanoes, and seismographs. Maybe for those of you that are more into STS, which is Science and Technology Studies, that is not such a weird thing. I was hoping to bring something refreshing and surprising if you're not. But I see lots of familiar faces, so I know lots of people here actually know that this is not as weird as it sounds. But I'm going to try to make it as interesting as it was for me to encounter this notion. So basically, the talk is divided into two sections. The first one is about synchronization, or basically the way in which people in Indonesia, near the Merapi volcano, anyone knows where's the Merapi volcano? Have you heard about that? So it's one of the most famous volcanoes in the world. I actually didn't know about it before I started this program. And there are 148 volcanoes, if I remember correctly, in Indonesia. And this is probably one of the most famous. And basically the way—
Sorry, I can't hear you at all.
Yeah.
Just ask you to step closer to the mic.
Oh, the mic. Well, I could use this other thing because I like to move. Yes? Do you think that's better? Should I use this one? I feel like a preacher when I use these small microphones.
Is it much better? Maybe it's just the position of the speaker on top.
Oh, that's one. Yeah, and let's see if that. This is just cool, right? Okay, so it's gonna be the preachy sort of presentation, not in the content, but at least in the sound. So basically, this is all about work that I did almost 7 years ago, and it's not old work. Even though it happened 7 years ago, we took 4 years to publish the paper that was attached because we had to translate and back translate and find out the meaning of words and make sure that we didn't introduce some sort of like weird concepts that didn't match up with the ethnographic method. Anyone here except from the STSers and sociologists knows what is ethnography? Yes? Who doesn't know what is ethnography? Okay, it's witchcraft, all right? So ethnography is basically us going to the field and not knowing what we don't know. So it's the basic science of social science. Instead of having a hypothesis, right, most of us go there and start finding ways to look into the field. We usually spend some time making up our concepts, okay? So we don't have a very definite way to think about a social setting. And the other thing that makes ethnography interesting is that most of us don't only look at persons. It sounds, of course, ethno, right, is about people, ethnicity, and so on. But in science and technology studies, we also look at things, at science, for instance, the way science produces knowledge. And we are kind of obsessed in my field with scientific knowledge, and in my case, the ways in which scientific knowledge operates in the world, how it orders the world, the sort of authority it brings, but also how indigenous people engage with it and subvert it. So this talk is about how people in Indonesia have managed to bring rituals and dreams in conversation with seismographic readings. And the way I teach these to most of my students is, anyone here would make major life decisions based on their dreams? Like getting married? Yeah, maybe evacuating when a volcano is erupting? Yeah, no one? Really? Yes, just one person. Yes, I do say yes. Well, we're going to be talking about people that actually take dreams very seriously. Okay, dreams are not some sort of epiphenomenon or accident that just happens and we need to kind of like brush away. They are central, not just to their culture, but to everyday decision making. Okay, and dreams matter from the very basic everyday rituals to keep the volcano kind of in conversation with the spirits, all the way to evacuation drills, okay? But whenever you think about dreams and science, you would think that science has truth and dreams have kind of revelations, right? Some spiritual knowledge that doesn't really talk with scientific knowledge. Or do you think dreams are scientific in any way or form? Sort of? Yeah? No one would think that dreams are scientific here, right?
What do you mean by dream science?
Yeah, so basically, can you use dreams to know the reality of the world? Would you guide your scientific knowledge based on dreams? Of course not. I'm going to tell you, yeah, the Western world tells you not to do that, right? You need evidence, you need experiments. Dreaming is something, and subjectivity is something that you need to leave outside of science for science to be objective, right? We're talking about some guys that don't care about that. Actually, the notion we're going to introduce today is synchronisasi, which is the name in Indonesian to the way in which they describe their knowledge production. So one of the things that happens is that non-modern cultures are not so obsessed with true scientific knowledge as we are. So whenever they encounter something different, they are not thinking about this or judging it based on it's true, scientifically proven, or it's not true. That means it's not scientifically proven. For them, it's more about finding the ways in which these different knowledge registries speak to each other. Of course, they're not telling me that, right? They're just telling me they care about some people knowledge. They are not telling me, well, I'm talking about knowledge registries. They just tell me how they interpret their dreams. And what is even cooler is that they have access to seismographic readings. When I talk about seismographic readings, I mean the machine, right? That sort of maps the waves, the seismic waves. And they have access because they have tapped into the seismographer, yeah, the seismographic reading of the experts in the volcano, which are available online for them to listen. And they have learned what are the sounds of lahars. Lahars is a mudslide in Indonesian. So if you hear lahar anywhere, it comes from Indonesian Bahasa, which is a common language, and it means mudslide. And they have trained themselves to learn what are the sounds of these waves. So just by hearing something in the seismograph, they would know if a lahar is coming or actually something more dangerous than that. So synchronisasi is the name they give to the practices that allow them to connect dreams with these seismographic readings with policy and warning signals, okay? And the Merapi is probably the only place, we did this comparison in 3 places around the world, in which you have this incredibly omnivorous and inclusive way of warning against volcanic dangers. And so you kind of really engage and appreciate how weird and wonderful Indonesia is. I'm gonna bring the example of Mexico, all right? Mexico is a completely different space when it comes to indigenous knowledge and scientific knowledge. It's a very colonial vertical space. And actually we haven't published a paper on Mexico because the scientists were opposed to also including indigenous voices in the paper. They thought that indigenous people should not be part of our paper because they have superstition and they wanted to publish science, okay? Yes, we went to ethics. I used to work in Durham up north, and it took us 2 years of fighting. And now we have solved this thing, but of course it's too late. We need to go back and rewrite the paper. But just so you know, Mexico is completely opposite to Indonesia. Dreams, by the way, seem to be very kind of like intimate ways of knowing volcanoes for lots of indigenous cultures. In Mexico, dreams matter as well. There are ritual masters that dream about the volcano, and that's the way they engage with the volcano. In Japan, something similar happens. So we compare Japan, Mexico, and Indonesia. Today, I'm going to be talking about the case of Indonesia, which is, for me, the most interesting of the 3, even though I enjoyed the trip to Japan massively, I have to confess. But the Mexican case study is going to help us understand how much and why this is so interesting. So this is actually the Tiempero. And the Tiempero, similar to Indonesia, the Tiempero means the weatherman. So he dreams about the weather. And you become a Tiempero when a thunder strikes you. Well, that's what they say. I haven't proved. I have never been struck by lightning, right? But if lightning strikes you, you start dreaming about the volcano. If you survive, of course, right? So this is the kind of narrative here. And the Tiempero is actually someone, you can see the Tiempero over here, that is recognized by Mexican government, which is something similar to Indonesia. The ritual masters in Indonesia are recognized by the government. They have a stamp, okay? So it's not just anyone that is dreaming, it's someone that is certified, so to speak. The same in Mexico, but the main difference here is that in Mexico, the Tiempero and the indigenous people are always in kind of confrontation and open, I would say, disagreement with volcanologists. And volcanologists try to always control the way in which these indigenous leaders behave, advise others, and try to compel them to accept their scientific knowledge as the best way to deal with danger. So the question is, when we're doing this type of research, what is evidence? Is evidence what scientists tell us evidence is all about? Is what's happening in their labs? Is the seismograph? Or is something such as our trip back from the volcano? So we came down from the Popocatépetl volcano in Mexico, and the first thing that happened is that this car completely broke. And I had taken my mother, my father, and all my friends to the trip, because of family ethnography, right? When you go to do this sort of thing. So we were all there stuck in the volcano. And suddenly one of the young kind of like devotees to the Popocatépetl looks at us very angrily and say, this happened because we know you don't really believe. The volcano is punishing us. The fact that this bus has broken down is evidence that you are non-believers, right? And you are laughing. I was not laughing, by the way, I have just to say, right? But lots of people were laughing about the ritual. And that's why Don Goyo, that's the name they give to Popocatépetl, has punished us. So most of us would think this is an anecdote, right? This is a funny anecdote that tells us about how beliefs work. But for me, that is evidence. And that is evidence of another way to engage with the world, okay? So that's one of the things about ethnography. Ethnography is not about scientific reality. It's about understanding evidence in all its forms. Yeah? That's why bias doesn't really work. Bias for me is the source of my kind of theoretical constructs. And bias is actually incredibly rich. It's going to tell me something that is impossible to know without taking that seriously. And the other thing that happens with us moderns is we think that religion, belief, and ritual is something that is foreign to protection, to rationality, to science, and actually is quite the contrary. I've spent 4 years working with scientists, the same way in which I engage with indigenous people, I have engaged with scientists, 4 years living with them in their laboratories, with all the rituals to clean samples, right? With all the rituals to make sure that their PCAs, their principal component analyses, are clean enough to be shown, making sense of complexity, and showing me their evidence as well. So ritual is something that is not just happening in these traditional societies, indigenous places, but it's something that is central to the way we produce knowledge in the modern world. And by the way, is incredibly important when you think about danger and protection. So this is something completely different in Yogyakarta. In Yogyakarta, indigenous people, and when I say indigenous, I just mean local people, right? They don't need to be ethnically marked for them to be indigenous here. They don't care about that. This is a very Mexican thing, because Mexico is probably one of the first colonial spaces in the world. And the relationship between science and indigenous knowledge is quite vertical. No one in Indonesia really cared about that. The question was not if you really believe, was how to synchronize all these different natures of the world. And that is incredibly interesting, because this is the way in which we can learn to do ethnographies and do a little bit of engagement with environmental issues that is not prescribed by our own belief and activities around science. Okay, so basically the point of this talk is that we need to learn from the people in Indonesia to do ethnographic work around the world. And in Yogyakarta, basically they feel super proud to care for other people's knowledge. They don't want to test the knowledge. They just want to make sure that they can harmonize that knowledge. And how they do that, you would ask me. I mean, that sounds weird. How you synchronize knowledges that comes from dreams and people telling me they see spirits coming down the volcano with seismographic readings. Any takers? Any guesses? How does that happen? No? No, come on. Not even one little guess? Do they throw some dice and decide based on that, like Dungeons and Dragons? How does that work? How would you bring dreams into your everyday life?
Write them down. Things like that.
Yes, actually, there was a huge project, and there's a beautiful book called The Database of Dreams about some guys in Harvard that tried to collect 65 million dreams based on these things. Yes. Dance, yes, of course. That's one way. Art is one way in which we bring dreams into our everyday life. Any other way? No?
Offerings.
Offerings, of course. Offerings is central to the way we engage with dreams. In fact, in Indonesia, they do a lot of offerings. The most simple and straightforward way in which they engage with dreams is through offerings. And that happens every year, okay, through a huge volcano of rice that they collect and they give back to the land. In fact, whenever there's an eruption, it's a big, big event, not just because people have to leave their homes and your life is in danger, but because it's the way in which the volcano is telling people in Yogyakarta, Indonesia, that something's wrong with politics. Okay? So the volcano for them is not just a kind of like geophysical landscape. It's a spiritual entity that always tells us something about the world, about the spiritual landscape. So for them, synchronizase is making sure that they can map this spiritual landscape with the more geomorphological, right, seismographic readings. Because they don't have this modern notion of trying to decide what is true and what is false, they are able to bring all these knowledges together. And that is synchronizase, okay? It's through rituals. Sometimes they kill their puppies, something that probably most of us would not do, okay? And they bury their puppies in the volcano. Sometimes they dream with chickens, and it means that the ritual has to involve some offerings with live chicken, okay? And sometimes they just keep their dreams very quietly and close to their hearts. Because when you share a dream, it means that you're a ritual master and people are gonna come knocking to your door for some help. So people don't share dreams lightly, okay? And this cannot be more different to the way knowledge is approached in Mexico, right? Graniceros, the weather masters, are always in a way persecuted because, you know, they are allowed to get close to the volcano, to the ritual. By the way, this is a picture I took when I tried to go all the way to the top of the volcano. I don't have the condition to do that. Ellie knows when we were in the Andes that I'm complete crap when it comes to physical things. I'm totally destroyed when we go up the mountain. So that the Emperor, who is 75, was just running, and I just stayed there and took this picture while waiting. Okay, I made it 1 hour after him, okay? And of course, these scientists allow people to do the ritual once a year, and that's it. The volcano is off limits. If you think about what's going on in Yogyakarta and Mexico, the people in Yogyakarta would live all the way near the crater, okay? So all the pictures you saw, me being in Yogyakarta was near the crater of the volcano. I was a little bit stressed because we were just 4 kilometers from the crater, and if something happens, then, you know, one of these pyroclastic things is around 300 kilometers per hour. So you just, when you see it, you're dead, okay? So I was a little bit stressed. Anyway, so the question was, why don't people protect themselves? And according to governmental authorities, it was basically because they are cultural dopes. Yeah, these guys are lacking education. They don't know about science. What else do you think could be a typical answer of why people don't protect from volcanic dangers? What have you heard? Or any danger? It's about something you lack. Either you lack education, yeah, you lack knowledge, you lack care for your life. So the way in which the government and scientists think about lacking is always something that is lacking in the public. And they don't understand science. This is what we call the moral deficit paradigm. And in Mexico, it's kind of super central to the way experts explain the way in which indigenous people engage with danger. And what is the main thing that indigenous people are lacking? A modern worldview. They lack the understanding of science. If only they understood science, everything would change. And of course, it comes in many guises, such as they don't have historical memory and so on. Most of us, when we do social science and we go to the field with our hypothesis, we are doing a little bit of these. We are prescribing the field. We are trying to find answers before we do the research. Yeah, and that's a little bit problematic when we engage with climate change. I say a little bit because sometimes our hypotheses are, okay, they come from previous research. They're not just made up stuff, but most of the time they reflect more what we believe and the answers we want to give to the research than actually the way we should engage with these complex matters. So there's always this link between education and behavioral change. And oh God, I've seen this everywhere. This whole idea that once we get the right information, then behavior is gonna change. There's no empirical proof of that, okay? The first thing I'm gonna tell you, the people that didn't protect near the volcanoes were the scientists themselves. They didn't like the masks. They were stuffy, sweaty, so they didn't use them. But they were telling me all the time that these bloody indigenous people didn't get the message, okay? And I think this is exactly what's happening when we engage with knowledge. We have these double standards, and it's very hard for us to see what are the limits of our own knowledge-making practices. And in a way, ethnography is about witchcraft, which I already mentioned, but it's also about unlearning what we already think we know about climate or the environment or ideas about social interactions. And people actually didn't like using masks. In Indonesia, people didn't like the mask. They never felt protected, and 99% of people used the mask. The question for us was why they want to protect from volcanic ashfall if they don't think it's dangerous, if they don't like the masks, if they actually don't feel protected by them, why the hell would they use the masks? The puzzle for us was not, as my volcanologist colleagues wanted us to prove, how to make masks more amenable for people to use and protect themselves, which is usually what we do when we want to intervene in a place. We want to educate people so they can change their behavior. But the real question was, why the hell do they use the masks if they don't really fit, if they don't think there's any danger? So the answer was very simple. It has to do with care and ritual. They use the masks because they're caring for each other. It was a sign of respect. It had nothing to do with our theories about protection or knowledge or change of behavior, okay? And we could see that in COVID, right? Lots of these ways in which we sanction public spaces and the use of masks explain why people that might be, oh, I don't want to use a mask, right? Complied with the norms. And these are just some kind of quotes from the people in Yogyakarta and Mexico that explained to me that they didn't really like the masks. They didn't see the point of them, but still they use them. Now I'm going to be talking about some of the things. Oh, one slide is the other way. When I start more with the volunteering thing, it should be this slide. This is part of Yogyakarta. Oh, what happened? Oh, I just made a little mess for my presentation. Anyway, so I'm talking about the volunteering networks, and I'm going to go fast now because I want you to see some of the videos of this beautiful research group we have on STS and environmental intelligence. And Ellie, Tom, Manju are here, so they're going to be cringy looking at their own videos. I know how you're going to feel. It has happened to me. But how this experience in Indonesia has informed what we are doing now in the environmental intelligence and STS group. So basically, one of the things that really explain what's going on in Indonesia is that they were able to mix this and create all these beautiful things. Oh, the letters are too little. But anyway, they were able to create this unique warning system in which dreams, seismographs, and everyday practices came together because they had access to WhatsApp and Facebook. Okay? So this is the way in which surveillance capitalism saves the day. Elon Musk has a little kudo. I don't like the guy, but he has a little star because, Zuckerberg or whoever are the new billionaires in the block helped these to happen. And people were already very keen in sharing through WhatsApp. And that's why we have these real-time messages, right? So all of these came together thanks to social media. But social media used by the volunteers in Yogyakarta. And I mean, this should be on the other side. But one of the things about volunteering in Yogyakarta is that it allows you to make a living. If your landscape is changing every 6, 7, 8 years, then the way in which lots of villages made a living was by creating small museums showcasing what happened to their bikes, cows, belongings. So one of the beautiful things of doing these ethnographic trips in Indonesia is that I could go to every village and they had their own little museum, right? They would say like, come. You have a little tour through their houses, and one room is just kept for you to see how it looked like during the eruption. This is what we call disaster cultures, how people that live near kind of disasters and that are recurrent, that happen in some sort of predictable way, adapt to it. So anyway, the whole point of that is that there's this a beautiful story about the emancipatory sides of surveillance capitalism, how Facebook and WhatsApp can actually be used in some very creative ways. And I use this as an example whenever we're talking about Cambridge Analytica and all the ugly things about surveillance capitalism, of how this could be used in interesting and very productive ways. Let's think about these. These are not smart cities. These are smart villages, right? Connected through these. They have a name for that in Indonesia. It's called Cyber Kampung, which is cyber village. And there's a whole policy in the government. And one of the great things about this is that it allows for dreams to be shared, okay? And this is the ritual master now. The regional one that did a little bit of, soap operas, TV commercials. He was a celebrity as well. Died in the last eruption because he refused to leave the village. All right, so there was a whole new negotiation in Indonesia. And this guy is much more prone to accept these scientific exchanges. So what are the concluding thoughts before we start looking at the videos of Tom, Manju, Ellie, and Josh? Well, we need to do more synchronicity. We need to learn from the people in Indonesia if we're going to do environmental ethnographies and we're going to engage with climate change and the climate crisis. Because we seem to know the answers before we do the research. We seem to know what's going on, how to engage with this, how to show our graphs of climate change to others, instead of understanding what's going on, right? And this is not just listening, by the way. This is not me saying you should listen and do more democracy. Synchronicity is about aristocratic knowledges. These people know about dreams. There's not just anyone coming and sharing their thoughts. Let's not make this a romantic space. They are also gatekeepers of what sort of dreams, what sort of seismographic readings matter, okay? So this is not let's have more democracy and listen to each other. Not at all. It's actually let's have a little bit more of aristocratic thinking that goes beyond our own assumptions. So let's have a little bit of unlearning so we can synchronize our knowledges. And maybe this is something we can adapt to the GSI, right? Maybe this is a sort of thing we can do in the co-production space. Maybe if we learn from the people in Indonesia, which actually I think have a much better relationship with science than the ones I interviewed and worked with in Mexico, for instance, we could start building real bridges in co-production. So based on that 3 years of doing really exciting, at least for me, because I have never been to Japan or Indonesia, and I'm Mexican, by the way. So Mexico was not as exotic, right? Of course, it's Mexico. I have my own indigenous roots. They are Nahuatls as well, so it's not as like, oh, so exciting. But going to Indonesia and Japan was incredibly exciting. But the most exciting part of that is it leads to new ways to think about all the issues. Volcanoes and studies about volcanoes have been there for ages. But actually, we were the first to pay attention to this specific way in which people in Indonesia, in the Merapi is an incredibly famous volcano. I cannot tell you how many papers you can find about the Merapi. But no one in those 20 years of going there had taken seriously WhatsApp messages, dreams, and the way in which people, local people, were engaging with danger. That seems weird, right? So, I mean, I read beautiful papers, seminal papers of the anthropology of religion, sociology of religion, none of which ever connected this with what's going on in the scientific fields or with WhatsApp. And I guess this is not just a critique for, oh, you scientists need to listen to indigenous people, but it's also a critique to all social scientists that are thinking about our own little fields and careers and carving them in such a way that's something that is so interesting and so in your face, because this is not difficult to find. It's not just because I'm a great ethnographer. I am, by the way, but this is everywhere, okay? So now I'm gonna try to show you some of the things that shape how we are doing the environmental intelligence STS work. So one of the things that happened with all my colleagues that are natural scientists, is that they didn't want to publish the stuff about volcanoes because it was not representative, right? They think that social science is making surveys. And that's wrong, my friends. If anything is more demeaning to all social scientists that are qualitative social scientists, is that you want us to make inventory social science. And I actually know when people are not doing their homework, when they give me an inventory of things. Yes, why know they're not doing their homework? Because it's easy to just go and interview people, but finding the mechanisms and the relationships takes years. That's why we translated and Max translated things. Okay, so one way in which you would know that people haven't done their social science homework is when you see inventory, right? Like they say mixed methods and you just have some quotes without a lot of context. They don't tell you how they connect with each other, but they have talked with people. And it also means that social scientists conform to the quantitative desires of their scientist counterparts, okay? So avoid that. This is not about representativeness. There's just one dream master in each of the volcanoes I was. Well, actually, Mexico, there were two. I have to correct myself. And they were fighting for supremacy. But there are 2,500 inhabitants of this little town near the volcano. Of course, this is not representative. Yes? I don't care about representativeness. So this work is completely contrary to that notion. The other thing that is super important is that we make these very slow. Things that seem to be not problematic and straightforward are actually very problematic. And this is going to be an example of one, once I trained the postdoc in Mexico, right? So my job was training different postdocs and spend 1 month with them doing ethnography. And the first interview we had with one of the guardians of the volcano, who was a policeman that took every day 3 pictures of the volcano. And he claims there are UFOs near the volcano throwing things. All right, and that's why he's so famous, and lots of people go and ask him stuff. Was telling us that actually eruptions happen because there's a lot of people that do illegal logging, you know, chopping trees off. And then I immediately saw this postdoctoral fellow saying ecological explanation of eruptions, right? And I say like, well, that sounds cool. Let's wait and see what is the link, right? We don't know what is the link here. He just told us that someone is logging trees, and therefore we have an eruption. And surprise, surprise, it had nothing to do with whatever we thought about ecology. It was basically because the volcano dresses up with the forest. And because he's a very vain, a very flirtatious, romantic volcano that wants to seduce the volcano in front, he gets really mad when humans caught this traje de charro, which is like a tuxedo, if you like, in Mexican terms. Yes? And I mean, this sounds weird and fun, and that's why I use it, but that happens as well when we do analysis of scientific practice. We assume that we know what's going on, and what we need to do is unlearn and wait a little bit. And finally, ritual is not an obstacle to protection, but actually its very embodiment. So if we are going to really do ethnographic engagements with the world, we need to unlearn all these ideas and all these distinctions between emotion, okay, and rationality. In fact, I can tell you, I promise you, all the sociologists that invented this don't know what they were talking about. They had no idea. We cannot define what is an emotion and what is a thought. And most of our distinctions, when it comes to societies, we tend to think that we have rationality in one side of the game, rational societies, modern societies that are governed by science, and emotion and tradition in the other. That's not the case. Science for us is sacred in a way. It has become the norm. So we have a lot of rituals around science. A lot of our traditions have to do with science. So these are not opposing forces. So whenever we do this in the GSI and we engage with the climate crisis, I think we need to engage with this problem, this dichotomy, because it means that we cannot really understand what's going on in the field. And we preempt the field. We already have the answers, as I told you before, the questions. And that's basically what I think we need to learn a lot about the people in Indonesia. We need to practice a lot more synchronicity. And now we're going to talk about how we're trying to practice that in Exeter through the voices of Ellie, Tom, and Manju. I think you're doing it, guys. Don't laugh. Don't laugh. This is we should call our group Synchronicity group now, the synchronization group. So now we're going to learn a little bit about the work. Oh, God, I did a messy thing here. Where do I find the other bits and pieces where I can change the... Sorry. I'm looking for the other newsher. Let's say the newsher. Ah, it's here. Yes. Somewhere here. Oh, here it is. So you can see this? No, right? Yes? I can see it in the oh yes. Okay.
Oh no, it's a file.
Oh, here it comes. So we're going to see how that sort of SDS and environmental kind of approach to ethnographic research looks like in the Andes, right? And if you have questions, Ellie's just there. Let's.
Unfortunately, we can't hear online.
All right, so we can hear online. I heard that one.
The opposite of what some social and physical
And someone online, just let us know if you can hear it now.
relations. I'm bringing together ethnographic research methods from social science and then remote sensing from physical science as well. But I've kind of done the opposite of what some glacier studies that seek to engage with people and communities do, and I've started with the social rather than having it as kind of a later down work package. So in March to April of the first year of my PhD, so this year I spent.
We're going to start
Hi
again.
everyone. Hi everyone, my name's Ellie Fox and I'm a second year PhD student on the Environmental Intelligence CDT. In my research, I'm studying how glacier retreat in the semi-arid Andes of Chile affects the availability of water and the access to water from different communities and stakeholders. The kind of point of departure for my PhD can be summed up more or less by this quote by French et al., which is that scarcity must be understood as the outcome of not only physical changes in water availability, but also of complex social relations that influence how and where water flows. In other words, it's not enough if we want to understand how glacier retreat affects water availability to just study a volume change in a glacier, look at how that affects the volume in a river and say water scarcity will therefore change by X amount. Because there's a whole lot of other social processes that affects how water actually gets to people, whether that's from top-down policies, from governments, or more kind of mundane practices of when am I going to irrigate my crops today or something like that. So in order to study these the interactions between these complex social and physical relations, I'm bringing together ethnographic research methods from social science and then remote sensing from physical science as well. But I've kind of done the opposite of what some glacier studies that seek to engage with people and communities do, and I've started with the social rather than having it as kind of a later down work package. So in March to April of the first year of my PhD, so this year I spent time in Chile, carrying out interviews, informal discussions, attending workshops, and following the threads that I picked up from there to understand what were these kind of complex social and physical factors that affected how water actually gets to people. I spoke to environmental organisations, so both NGO and activists, scientists working for government organisations, research institutes and citizen science, and then local government members too. So quite a wide range of people. And the main benefits of doing this at the start of my research was that it's kind of exploded the assumptions I had when I came into my PhD, and now the learnings that I've got can influence how I design the physical science of my PhD now as I'm at the start of my second year. So I came into my PhD thinking glaciers are a water resource, and whilst they are important for water provision, viewing them as a resource specifically and the kind of relations that entails can actually limit what opportunities exist to protect them. And also, I'm now questioning if we know kind of the limitations of conventional environmental management and regulations, is designing our science in order to support these regulations when we know they don't especially work the best way to go. What happens if we ask different questions of our science? So fundamentally, to study and have kind of a useful understanding of the relationship between glacier loss and water access, science, and even social science that doesn't have a politically engaged component isn't enough. And combining these physical and social science methods is really critical to allow us to see the politics that affect how water gets to people in practice. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ellie. That's so cool. Now, forgive me, I'm a little bit not great with the sharing thing. I think there's a screen here that should allow me to do more of these. Yes, where we have the videos and all that stuff. Yes. Oh, that's it. I think I don't see it anymore. There was one that had all the list of the, oh, is this one? Yeah. Sorry for that. I tried to integrate them to my PowerPoint, but I don't have the skills and it was just huge. Okay. And I could not share it, so I apologize. This is my lack of technical skills. Someone in the cyber campaign would really do it a lot better than me. I mean, if you have questions as well, you can ask the questions while we get the thing sorted. Yes, Tom, don't, you look very worried. Yours is good, Tom. Great. I mean, all of your presentations are great, by the way. And this is kind of what we're trying to do in terms of co-production, right? Okay. So this is Josh, probably mass graves in Mexico. So this is a little bit more green.
Yeah, go full screen, like
I'll do that. Yeah, that I can do.
sharing them.
We are not sharing the.
Are we sharing that?
Yeah, we're showing that.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Hello everyone, my name is Josh. I'm one of Ernesto's PhD students. My project is focusing on the participatory design of forensic software that makes use of satellite imagery, which is a bit of a mouthful, but I'm going to get into that a bit more. So basically what I'm doing is I'm working with forensic citizens, NGOs, experts, and so on, particularly focusing on Mexico, to produce software that lets people use satellite imagery to conduct searches for clandestine mass graves, other kinds of evidence for human rights violations, and so on. The use of satellite imagery in these kinds of investigations isn't really anything new. So what we see here in the screenshot is a bit of an investigation by Forensic Architecture, who in this one they're talking about illegal deforestation and kind of burning of forests in West Papua, in Indonesia, related to palm oil plantation expansion. But when we start to kind of engage with building these tools, you get a bunch of weird questions. So like, who is actually doing these forensic investigations, and like, why are they experts versus not experts? And also, you know, how useful are satellites really? Because a lot of the time the issue isn't really that people don't know what's going on. It's that, you know, there's not the right political will or the right kind of government structures to actually act on it. And also, in the face of these issues, what can participatory design actually do to improve the situation? And it's been really interesting to kind of explore these questions, both with Ernesto and with participants, but also with the other PhD students. So that's Tom, Ellie, and Manju, who are in the same group, and we kind of work collaboratively together to help solve some of the theoretical problems with them, which has been a really good experience. So one cool thing about working together with a group of PhD students and with Ernesto in this kind of more collaborative way is that we get to share information about what methods we use and how we approach different problems in different ways. My approach in particular is that of participatory design, where we use an iterative process comprised of semi-structured interviews, group workshops, other kinds of design exercises with stakeholders, software users, and other people who are interested in the project to understand the kind of earlier aforementioned political questions, as well as exploring the actual needs of the software, UI design, and other kinds of interesting research questions that might emerge from that. This approach is quite different from other research done in the past because it's design research. So whilst the goal is obviously to produce research and scholarly output, another big part of it is also to create artifacts that people can use. In this case, software that lets people use satellite imagery in their kind of forensic searches. And in the process of doing this, so in the process of trying to create something that people can use, which is fit to the kind of political realities that they inhabit, it starts to generate lots of other interesting research questions which we can solve in a more kind of traditional research way. So in one case, some concerns over privacy led me to explore generating new kinds of methods for anonymizing satellite imagery using machine learning, which is not something I'd seen developed before in the research field. And it's been really cool to do this again as part of a group because we get to see how each other's research is progressing and how we're all interacting with these different kind of sticky and tricky situations in a way it's been kind of very satisfying to see, and also been really good to be able to support each other in that approach.
Okay, I'm gonna try the next one. Yeah, thanks. Josh is not here, unfortunately, but I'm trying to find the other one. It's back. So I just.
If you close that main screen and go back to this.
Oh, it's Manju's turn. Yes, no worries. Thanks so much.
Hello everyone, I'm Manju. I'm one of Ernesto's PhD students and I'm part of the Environmental Intelligence CTT here at Exeter. I'm studying the narratives of heat waves with a view of deconstructing dominant narratives and, more importantly, shedding light on the multiple and plural ways in which heat waves are constructed and understood. In my research, I employ quantitative and qualitative approaches where, through computational data science methods in NLP, narrative patterns are identified in heatwave-related news, and ethnographic methods have been used to explore a more nuanced and situated understanding of heatwaves. The project is driven by STS approach, and the use of ethnographic methods have been integral in understanding the politics of narratives and knowledge circulation. Ernesto and I recently conducted our fieldwork in Nepal, where we did some interviews and ethnographic observations with experts and communities in different parts of the country. Through our interactions and reflections on the interviews and what we observed in the field, we were able to explore the parametric form of heat waves in the explorocratic space and the conditions of possibilities that make these heat waves known and their boundaries defined. In the local communities, we visited, the idea of the term heat wave and lu, which is the Nepali word that refers to heat waves, was an incredibly elusive entity. Heat is so omnipresent that the idea of extreme heat is not necessarily seen as an existential problem. It is just there, even though heat governs the daily lives and routines of people there. There are these architectures of heat as local practices, the togdaris, the mud houses, and communal water pumps. And extreme heat is normalized as a part of their everyday experience. And then we also come across these spaces of permeation where the boundaries between these parametric concepts of heat waves and experiences of heat are negotiated through technological tools and practices and enforced through institutional authority. So this ethnographic approach has been crucial to enrich the understanding of heat wave narratives. A crucial part of the research in our PhD group with Ernesto, Josh, Ellie, and Tom involves engaging in collaborative dialogue to develop our ideas and to be reflexive about our methods, recognizing that our interactions are shaping our objects of research and analysis. In my view, our methods extend beyond the strictly technical practices and procedures to encompass our discussions, through which we generate interesting results and theorize our findings. So working together in this way, drawing from our STS orientation and leveraging our experiences with ethnographic approaches, we're able to nuance our findings instead of flattening them, and to generate knowledge that speaks back to the field, to the complexity of the issues, and to the people that are experiencing these environmental challenges in their specific contexts.
Right, thanks for that, Manju. I love the fact that these can be spoken with kind of like different voices. All right, so no, I'm the worst. I found it now. It's just I just need to make it small, right? And then this is Tom. Okay, Tom, it's your turn. It's fine, Tom.
Hi everyone, I'm Tom, one of Ernesto's PhD students. I'm in my second year at the minute, and I am researching urban mobility and transportation in Mexico City with a view to making it more environmentally sustainable, but crucially also more equitable and accessible. So one potential output of the project is to produce models or simulations that can help illustrate potential futures and outcomes determined by certain urban planning decisions, certain infrastructural decisions, or alternatively, kind of on the flip side of that, could be to help develop tools that allow citizens to reclaim space for sustainable mobility practices without having to wait for new infrastructural developments to actually be implemented. So an example of that could be an app that coordinates the routes of individual cyclists to allow them to travel more safely in numbers. A key part of the research is that while data science methods are being used, the project is kind of driven and underpinned by STS and the use of ethnographic methods in order to gain more understanding of the underlying social, cultural, and political themes that play into mobility. This is being done through conducting interviews and analysing the data collected. I started off with some interviews done by Ernesto last year, where I'm focusing particularly on issues surrounding cycling, along with related infrastructure and regulations, things like that. And I'll then directly build on the themes that emerge from those interviews when I go and conduct my own interviews in Mexico pretty soon, hopefully. In addition to this, I'm exploring historical documents to gain insights into the development of infrastructure over time, and also inequalities that have developed and persist today affecting mobility. So I'm doing this using NLP and machine learning and other lovely stuff like that. But overall, a massive part of this research is working with Ernesto and the other PhD students that he supervises, Josh, Ellie, and Manju, exchanging and developing ideas together, using our own experiences and perspectives on qualitative research, especially when we're engaging with quite thorny, politically charged issues, I mean, as most issues are. But I think we all want to prioritize working with the people affected by particular problems and situations, and use the knowledge produced to critique and push back against the systems that give rise to those issues, rather than simply describing situations and theorizing alone, kind of thing. And so working together in this way allows us to develop both more concrete methods, but also much more robust outputs, which I think have a greater chance of leading to real impacts.
All right, thanks. So as you can see, I'm very proud about the work that all my PhD students are doing, and I think they're wonderful, and we're doing all these STS work together. I have the luck of being part of the GSI. That's how I funded all the training we do together in the field, right? Which is one of the great things. I have to say thanks to the GSI for that. Well, all of us, whatever. And if you have any questions about how this sort of STS approach links back to the co-production issues, I think we're all here, and we have like 5 minutes left, or 3 minutes, which is awful. I should have planned my talk better. I apologize for that. But yes, let's talk about these 3 minutes.
Maybe we can take a few questions online first, because we can stick around and there'll be tea and coffee and chat.
Yeah, I saw the tea outside. Yeah.
No questions online yet. Sent a request at the beginning, or sent another request now?
So there.
You mentioned in your paper about people, when there's an eruption, it damages economic activity, but they tend to adapt because they find new avenues of lifestyle and they reconsider what they want to do. And there was this quote that you used, that guy said, "Oh, it's really cool, there's an eruption because it's a cheap hot lava tour." So this notion of, like you mentioned, disaster mentality, do you think that there's parallels with the way that Western society is basically thinking about climate change, this idea that maybe we can just, get bits out of the ashes and maybe sort of deal with it? Because you're a sociologist, do you think there's is it cultural, or is there a human element to this notion of maybe being masochistic or rolling with the punches of the wrath of your gods, even though climate change and the catastrophe is basically a god that we're making ourselves? But then you obviously conclude that paper by saying, mask use, even though you say that they're not doing it because they think it's going to save them, but there's a revelation of danger you mentioned. Like, do you see these sort of patterns in that whole narrative that's occurring?
I mean, most of these guys in Indonesia, they don't have any other option, right? We have lots of options to change these, but most of them, the only fertile ground is near the volcano. So this is a way in which they can engage with the structural kind of poverty that they live and they navigate through, but also because that landscape is so spiritually rich, it's a completely different take, right? So the volcano is not just something throwing punches at them, but it's kind of like a spiritual revelation all the time. So it's living near, I guess, in Western terms, Jesus Christ, right? I would like my house to be there. So I guess that's a different relationship with the landscape. And I don't know if it's a human thing to build something out of the ashes, but most of the field work I've done, people are incredibly plastic and can adapt and transform from disasters. I'm Mexican, by the way, and I can tell you lots of everyday experiences of people making things, wonderful things out of disastrous things. But that's definitely, for me, there's no distinction between what is human and what is cultural. So yeah, well, thanks. That was a great question. But I want to think we have more options with climate change. I hope so. Yeah, Ellie.
You're saying what we're taking.
Ellie always likes to challenge. We had a lot of challenging conversations in the field. I love that. I'm hoping one of those, Ellie.
Sorry, I was just going to ask, so you were saying about taking synchronicity to the GSI, and so we've heard a lot about how it works in this specific context in Indonesia, how can it look here? And also especially because not everyone has the luxury of having their supervisor come and field work with them and learn all these social science methods. For established scientists who want to think more about how to engage social and politics and stuff in their work. Yeah, what does it look like here? And there are some practical challenges as well.
That's a good question, because we cannot do field work together, even though I'm going to try. At some point, all of us in the GSI that are really interested in co-production, my long-term goal is that we can go to the field together, learn about these things, because most of the stuff we could not learn if we were not in the Andes together, right? Or I was more of a burden for Manju because I don't speak any Nepali language, but I try to help in the dinners and make some sort of joint analysis. But I mean, all this field work is essential for that sort of training in co-production, but we are going to have some workshops. We're going to be discussing objectivity very seriously. This is one of those issues that we need to tackle right now, because all these moral policing around being an objective scientist is, I think, very counterproductive to what's going on in the field today. So we need to tackle it head on. And we have some plans, the citizen, I mean, Rafi can tell you because we are working together a lot.
Yeah, Ernesto is one of the assistant directors, one of the new directors of the Global Systems Institute, and we have plans to shake up this seminar program in the coming months, and we want to do things that are more co-productive and that bring us together in ways where it's not just listening to someone speak for an hour, and where we can all engage and meet each other and work with each other. And we welcome ideas, actually, and we welcome help while I'm talking. If you want to help us organize this, please come forward.
Oh, well, we also have this thing about the black arts of co-production, right? So the whole
Yeah.
plan, in a couple of months, we are going to announce and these new strands of co-productive research, the water mining and glaciers one we're doing. I think we want to do a little bit of a co-production conclave, which is a new governance. So there are some plans, but definitely I hope I get a big grant and we all go to do some field work together. That would be my dream.
You mentioned.
Yeah. So do you have a question online just before we go to the children?
Oh, yeah, I just want to say, you mentioned the community assembly. We are going to hold an assembly next term where we're going to discuss topics that matter to us at the university level. So how can we change the structure of governance in the university? And also, another thing is you are going to have a workshop on Monday, 4th of December about co-production.
In the afternoon, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll take the question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Oh, great.
Yes.
Hi, yeah, very good talk. So I hope I have some agency being a seismologist myself, actually. And I wanted to float the idea that the measurement of seismic vibrations, of course, is a very fundamental sense that any species can sense, right? So it's might not be all that surprising that generation after generation has developed a peculiar capability of sensing very small vibrations, and they sort of turn into this subconscious dreamland, I guess. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that with such simplistic measurements as a seismic vibration, which is literally just the ground shaking below you, it might well be that, you know, a complex system such as a human or an animal, for that sake, might have developed much more sensitive senses to detect them that we're just not able to tap into just yet. So I guess my question is, have you also looked into sort of animal behavior, for example, as a sense around these volcanoes? Because of course there are many stories about them, you know, sort of running away ahead of eruptions and so on.
Yes, actually, one of the things in the paper is that people in Indonesia, when they see the tigers running down, they know something bad is happening. So the best sensors are other non-humans and animals around. So yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it would be fascinating actually to do something that kind of like moves across scientific ways of engaging with warning systems and danger, but also with these other kind of like spiritual revelations, animals, these knowledges that make up complex systems like the one in Indonesia. And I remember you have this cool project, I think in Africa, right? About elephants. And yes, yeah, I remember that chat. So I think there's a lot we can do in terms of co-production. And seismic kind of like staff vibrations, very simple signs are always great to engage with when it comes to citizen science and co-productive practices.
Right. Just.
Yeah, in Indonesia it was tigers because they never leave the top of the mountain. So when they see the tiger coming down, that's a sign. And it seems in the Andes we had a similar story, right, Ellie? Like when they saw the pumas coming down, that was also the sign that the glaciers and the water was running out, right?
Yeah, on a much different time scale. Like it is, I guess, a seismic thing is quite immediate, right? Boom was more like, we know something's wrong because these animals are starting to
come to the cities.
Yeah, come to the cities, but it's a kind of slower thing that like weird things start to happen. But yeah, it's interesting to look at that relationship and how people tell those stories too.
Yes, I mean, those are the originalities. We're not going to have a lot of animals in Mexico City, Tom. Now we go in January. Unfortunately, it's going to be stray dogs and cats because we have destroyed biodiversity mostly. But in the south part, we're going to go to the Chinampas, and then we have the beautiful xolotls, you know, the salamanders, the very famous Mexican ones. Yeah, have you heard about those ones? Yeah.
Okay, we're out of time for now, so I would suggest that maybe we wrap up the online part. Thank you everyone for joining us, and let's thank Ernesto again, and then we can continue to mingle in the room. Thank you, Ernesto. That was fascinating.
Thanks so much.
Question. Yeah.
So I'm just thinking as someone who's a Buddhist, how might I mean, I sort of think of climate change and environment in terms of kind of